Thanks, Walter. Hey, please, let's sit down. You see, I'm very smartly dressed today. This style is called color blocking. So you see, Fasi, I'm not very far from you. But I'm very glad, I must say, I'm very glad to see some people here today. Alec Erwin here. Tammy Denden, who's just been here. Geraldine, Fraser Mlegeti. Who else? I'm talking about people with whom we're in government for a number of years. And the reason I mention this is because I think from all our experiences, there's something that I'm sure all of us understood, that every day was a day of struggle. Because here we are, Mondli is correct, the ANC is the governing party, not the ruling party. And they send us into government. I'm Deputy President of the Republic, and so allocated an office at the Union Buildings. And in that room, there was a desk, a chair, the small table with a couple of chairs there, a telephone, and that was all. Not a piece of paper, no nothing. It meant in reality that there was no precedent. So we were not inheriting something. There was a former deputy president who then handed over to me and briefed me about what should be done. Because we're starting afresh. The Constitution says this, and the RDP program of the ANC says the other, and all of these things. What is it that must be done to translate all of these things into reality? Everything. You must rebuild the police, and you must do this, and I did everything. And I'm saying there's no precedent. So there's nothing that Alec Erwin is going to say, no, what is a precedent? Let me follow this precedent. No. You could setting precedents every day. Very, very complex process, comrade. No, I shouldn't say comrade. I might get me arrested. I'm talking about Monchi. Monchi, can I say comrade? No. A really very, very complex process. I think, Alec, I can say we tried our best. I'm sure there were mistakes we made and wrong things we did and all of that. But the point I'm trying to communicate with all of this is that at some point, many of us felt that this story that was being told practically, the remaking of South Africa in the way that it was, never mind the limitations of that, that story was not being told properly. Its challenges, its weaknesses, and in all of this. You'd get, the newspaper would say, can we interview you? And indeed, you give an interview. And you're hoping that at least this is going to help us to communicate some ideas. And in the end, Mondli, you find that that's actually, it's an opportunity for the interviewer to express their own views. Quite what the interviewee was saying, in a sense, is something you hang on as an interviewer to communicate your own views. So in the end, we said, look, let's tell our own story. In the Bantu Batu that Swiso was talking about were no longer there. The other papers which had been started, for instance, by the Communist Party, like New Age and so on, were no longer there. We had no voice. So we said, look, let's then speak. I think that's what we say in the very first letter, to explain why we are starting this Africa Today, to be able to communicate what we think. There would have been something very wrong, Mondley, with our letters if the media agreed with every letter. There would be something very wrong with the letters and maybe something wrong with the media itself. And it was inevitable that the ideas of the ANC would come into conflict with the ideas of the media in many, many ways. I can explain why. Maybe it's the thing that Tammy was talking about here. Who sets the agenda? Because all the time the media is setting an agenda, the ANC is setting an agenda. It's not always that we agree. And it's not be always that we agree or disagree. But it was necessary to communicate. I'm saying coming out of a very complex process. So the Secretary General of the ANC, we dealt with this thing, I think, Sagamonde, Swiso also. Historically, in the ANC, a policy was attached to the presidency, historically. That's why even when I was president, the spokesperson was in the president's office, not SG's office. Because that's where policy comes from. So therefore, this president had to be the one who communicates his policy. Now, interesting thing about this, I don't remember any occasion, Smarts is not here, when anybody in the NEC objected to any of the letters. But they were never submitted for approval by the NEC or a subcommittee. And the reason for that is because, in reality, as you sit in this position as president, you are every day listening to this leadership of the ANC, every day. And you are every day listening to the voice from the cabinet, the voice from the media, the opposition parties. You may not realize it, but every day it's these letters which are said to come from the president. They're actually letters from the movement. Because they express ideas that you pick up from the movement, from your colleagues, from your comrades. This is why they think about this matter, this is where we should go, and so on. Then you put it down in writing. And tell you a story which is not known. When the ANC in exile started publishing the January 8 statements from 1979. The first one, very first one, that series, was the one about the Battle of Isandlwana. Those January 8 statements presented by Oliver Tambo, President, on behalf of the NEC, not a single one was ever given to the NEC to approve. For the same reason that an Oliver Tambo was sitting there, was working with him, were all the time listening to what the ANC leadership is saying. By the time you write, and the reason the thing is not challenged is because indeed it's the ANC that's writing this thing. So this was the voice of the ANC. One might have been the scribe. I think it's a very important record. When I was told, my colleagues said, look, why don't we republish these letters? And part of the argument was they would help us to educate the younger generation, to expose this younger generation to all of the kind of thinking that Walter has been trying to demonstrate from reading extracts. Yeah. And I agreed, I thought that was correct. That we should do that, expose this younger generation to this thinking. It's the thinking of the ANC over a particular period. And there are certain positions, as Walter is repeating, that you could read this thing and think it was written last month. It's because there are certain values and certain principles and certain whatever of the ANC which are basic, which are fundamental, which don't change. If they change, then it's not the ANC. So that's why it becomes possible to reiterate certain things, to say, Comrade Nomvula, you're not doing this thing right. It comes out of this whole history of a very strong foundation in terms of values, in terms of whatever. And hopefully these letters will communicate all that, and even to the younger people. It may be, I'm sorry, let me say it may be, it certainly is today, that people will say many things against the ANC, critical things about the ANC. And they may be right. But I think this book, these letters, we can always refer them to them. Yes, it's possible. It was possible for the ANC when I was president to take a wrong direction. And Mondle was trying to indicate in his view where I went wrong. Quite possible. But indeed, then to say to this young person who's growing up, but here is a set of views about many subjects. This is what the ANC is. It may be that today, this afternoon, it may not be doing the right thing, but this is what it represents. So indeed, I'm very, very glad, Mtobi, that Scotterville agreed to publish this, and no doubt we'll come back to you for volume 2. There's another book you did not mention. I don't know when it's coming. There's a book with Scotterville, which must be published, I don't know when. The title of the book is A Marriage Made in Heaven. It's a very, very interesting book. It's actually a study of white politics. White politics from the 18th, 19th century up to today. Where does the National Party come from? Where does the Democratic Party come from historically? What do these political tendencies represent? Toby, I don't know when Scotterville is going to publish that book, but it will come. No, when we decided then that, okay, let's speak out. We agreed that let's make it weekly, and agreed that let it come out on Friday. There's a young lady here who came now during the break. She was working with Smarts. And she was telling us about the first day, the first issue had to come out, and the way they were waiting at Lutuli House for this thing to come. Weekly Fridays. In the end, it became weekly Fridays by 12. Because once it was 12:05 on a Friday, Smarts would get calls. Where is the ANC today? Where is the ANC today? So in the end, he then insisted that by 12 o'clock, this thing must be in. So we had to keep to that discipline. And then the agreement was that I would write this letter from the president for 3 months to launch the magazine, after which we'll keep the column, but then we'll ask other comrades to contribute letters, the text. So I say to Smarts, this is the last one I'm doing now in terms of our 3-month agreement. So you'll have to find somebody to write for the next week. Smarts says, no, but President, what you are trying to say to me now, you want to kill this journal. Because the demand is they want to hear what you are going to say every week. Now suddenly you disappear. So that's how, then I said, okay. That then stayed on for 7 years. And we agreed that we'll publish 50 letters a year, except for 2 weeks in December. So that's the December and New Year holidays. I expect it's the December holidays because the first Friday of January, then the next edition was come out. So for 50 weeks in every year, we had to do this thing on time. And it really, Monji was right, it didn't matter where we were in the world. It had to come out on Friday, hopefully before 12 o'clock, for all of those years. The first time I understood that it had a very wide global impact. We were in China. We went to Beijing, and then from Beijing went to Shanghai, from Shanghai to Hong Kong in order to fly back. When we were in Shanghai with the Communist Party people there in Shanghai, one of the things they say is 1 month, 2 months, whatever, ago, one of your delegations, there was a delegation from your comrades who came via Shanghai. And they had a discussion with us and so on. And then they say, we face a challenge as the Communist Party of China, that many, many people, when we explain China to them, they only hear with one ear and only see China with one eye. So, the Chinese, they know these constructs. And this was a problem with your comrades. They were listening to us with one ear and seeing only with one eye. And so what we did, from here, from Shanghai, they went to Hong Kong in order to connect with South African Airways to fly home. So we prepared some material for them to read as they were flying back to South Africa. That included your letter. So now I'm puzzled by this, because I don't remember writing any letter to the Chinese Communist Party. So I have to ask, what letter? They said, no. We mean a letter to ANC today. The one you headed, tell no lies, claim no easy victories. We gave a copy to them to read on the way to South Africa. That told me a story about what had happened to that delegation of ours. But the Chinese were reading this. So it was not only the media waiting every Friday, but I'm saying people far away like that. 3, 4, 5 years ago, I had to lead an observer delegation in Kenya on behalf of the African Union. And one of the Kenyans says, President, I used to be an ambassador in such and such a place on the African continent. Kenyan, I was ambassador. And the best day for our embassy was Friday. Because every Friday we would download ANC Today. And as a staff at the embassy, then we discuss these things that are appearing there. And he explains because it helped us to keep pace with what you people in South Africa were doing about South Africa, but also exposed us to thinking about many issues and global issues. Gave us a lead. So even now, a few days ago, there was a colleague, a woman from the US. I've known her from the days of, she was very active in the anti-apartheid movement. She was here 3, 4 days ago and saw this book on my desk and really got excited. Oh, we are publishing this thing? I said, yes. So no, she's very happy. That's the first time I realized that even the anti-apartheid movement in the US were reading this thing. So I'm saying at last we could see that what we had been complaining about, our voice is not being, we're not being heard about what we're trying to do here in South Africa. Let's do something. That became global. Indeed, Mondli, you are quite right. It was unfortunate that, in a sense, at some point, the ANC discontinued the practice. Because it was a very, very important point of communication. Secretary General, I don't know how happy you are with ANC communication up to today. I'm intending that it clearly is not. And it's right, and I've looked at this, I see there are so many websites, pages that appear on the internet. All sorts of programs, very new, and they are doing all sorts of communications. Recently, I've seen my ANC. There is at least that. But I think it's insufficient communication from the ANC. But colleagues, I'm very, very glad indeed, Mtobi, that we've been able to put out this volume 1 and look forward to the volume 2. But in the end, I'm saying, as Nomvula was saying, the struggle continues. Exactly because the struggle continues, because the process of the transformation of this country is going to take time. You can see the regression that's been taking place over the last few years. We've got to overcome that as part of this continuing struggle. And so that communication from people who are so deeply entrenched in the process of transformation, of giving birth to the new, that communication becomes very important, critically important. Knowing very well indeed that it's not everybody who's going to agree. In that context, let me just mention one instance, which I remember it because it caused quite a bit of restlessness. The late Archbishop Tutu, I think, got over-influenced by what other people were saying. and made a statement which was that, you know, these members, even this leadership of the ANC, they are just fodder, cattle fodder. They're not thinking. What is this, whatever the English word, but they are ahead. So it was wrong. Because in cabinet, we had very vigorous discussion. The cabinet minister brings a cabinet memorandum on transport, and there'll be vigorous discussion of this matter about this. What is this memo saying? It's the same thing in the ANC. We introduced in the ANC an item on the agenda of the NEC, whenever the NEC meets, a political overview. The president must present a political overview, and then for the whole day or 2 days there must be a discussion. So the notion that you then had just a herd of people who were not thinking, were just was incorrect. And so I wrote a letter and I said, the Archbishop is ill-informed on this. There's a lot of restlessness. Now, how can you say this about an icon? You know, there's some holy cows. But you couldn't do that. I mean, the thing was wrong, and we had to say it's wrong. Fortunately, the Archbishop later told me that he had forgiven me. The other one was a speech made in London by one of our corporate chiefs here, who answered the question and said the political situation in the country was not good and therefore not conducive to investment, something like that. Now, this is a company which was almost 100 years old. And all of the years they are operating under the apartheid system, they never raised this thing about the political situation is not good for investment. They never did. Comes this transformation now, the political. So, of course, I objected. I said, it can't be right. Many years later, Alec, I did an interview with a journalist that Mondli would know very well. And before we started the interview, he says to me, you know, you remember this letter you wrote? I said, sure, I do. He says, from that day onwards, the captains of industry became so terrified of you. I said, but I wish I had been told that, because then we would have got more out of them. But they were making a difference, these letters. And I think, SG, we must look again at this matter. Communication, that must make a difference. It has to make a difference because we are at the center of the process of change, of giving birth to the new. So we must talk about that. And even where we go wrong, we must also say something about that. But thanks to everybody for coming. I don't know how much we are charging for each copy. I'm told I must sign some books now, which I will do. But thanks a lot for coming, and